Buenos días, buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a este webinar. Les recuerdo que este webinar está disponible en 6 idiomas. Para escuchar este webinar en español, por favor busquen el botón Interpretation, que está abajo, aplástenlo y seleccionen el idioma Spanish. Una vez que hayan aplastado el idioma deseado, el icono cambiará. Para los que nos están escuchando a través de YouTube y desean escuchar la traducción al español, les recuerdo que este servicio está disponible solo a través de Zoom. Así que por favor conéctese a la plataforma de Zoom para tener la traducción hecha. Para cualquier problema, por favor pidan ayuda a través de la chat y nuestro equipo técnico les asistirá. Que disfruten el webinar. Muchas gracias. Buon pomeriggio a tutti. Benvenuti, benvenute a questo webinar. Vi ricordo che il webinar è disponibile in 6 lingue. Per ascoltarlo in italiano bisogna spingere il tasto Interpretation in basso e selezionare la lingua Japanese. Ci scusiamo per questo piccolo inconveniente tecnico che forse potrà creare confusione. Una volta selezionata la lingua desiderata, il bottone Interpretation sarà sostituita dall'icona Japanese. Per coloro che ci stanno seguendo attraverso YouTube, vi ricordo che il servizio di traduzione è disponibile solo sulla piattaforma Zoom, quindi se siete interessati a sentire la traduzione dovrete spostarvi su Zoom. Per qualsiasi problema potete rivolgervi al nostro team di supporto tecnico attraverso la chat. Buon ascolto e grazie.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We welcome people from throughout the world to our workshop on sustainability. We're so glad to have you all here. We invite you to each introduce yourself and where you're from in the chat. Be sure to select everyone when you're sending that so we can all see who's all with us today. And I would invite Paolo to share about how the interpretation is going to work today in Spanish and Italian.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, bienvenidas y bienvenidos a este webinar. Les recuerdo que está disponible en 6 idiomas. Para escuchar en español, por favor busquen el botón Interpretation que está abajo, aplástenlo y seleccionen el idioma Spanish. Una vez que hayan aplastado el idioma deseado, el icono cambiará. Para los que nos están escuchando a través de YouTube y deseen escuchar la traducción al español, les recuerdo que este servicio solo está disponible en la plataforma Zoom. Así que, por favor, si están interesados en este servicio, tienen que abrir la plataforma Zoom. Para cualquier problema, por favor, pidan ayuda a través de la chat y nuestro equipo técnico les asistirá. Que disfruten el webinar y muchas gracias por asistir. Buon pomeriggio a tutte e a tutti, benvenuti, benvenute. Questo webinar è disponibile in 6 lingue e per ascoltarlo in italiano spingere il tasto Interpretation che si trova in basso e selezionare la lingua Japanese. Ci scusiamo per questo piccolo inconveniente tecnico che forse potrà creare un po' di confusione. Una volta selezionata la lingua desiderata, Japanese, il bottone Interpretation sarà sostituita dall'icona Japanese. Per coloro che ci stanno seguendo attraverso YouTube, vi ricordo che il servizio di traduzione è disponibile solo sulla piattaforma Zoom, quindi dovrete iscrivervi e accedere a Zoom per avere questo servizio. Per qualsiasi problema potete rivolgervi al nostro team di supporto tecnico attraverso la chat. Buon ascolto e grazie.
Thank you, Paulo. And we thank all the interpreters who are making this available in multiple languages. I'm very pleased to be facilitating this workshop today. My name is Marianne Comfort. I'm an associate with the Sisters of Mercy and also a member of the congregation's justice team. And I'm also a member of the Global Catholic Climate Movement Steering Committee. And I'm very pleased to be with you all today. Just to go over once again, we have translations in multiple languages, and we'll be asking our speakers to speak clearly and slowly so that our interpreters can do a good job for all those listening in these various languages. And I'm going to go through these slides that again show where you can click to get interpretation in your language. So we are going to open with the prayer that Pope Francis is inviting us to all pray at noon on May 24th, the anniversary of the publication of Laudato Si. Loving God, creator of heaven and earth and all that is in them, you created us in your own image and made us stewards of all your creation. You blessed us with the sun, water, and bountiful land so that all might be nourished. Open our minds and touch our hearts so that we may attend to your gift of creation. Help us to be conscious that our common home belongs not only to us, but to all of your creatures and to all future generations, and that it is our responsibility to preserve it. May we help each person secure the food and resources that they need. Be present to those in need in these trying times, especially the poorest and those most at risk of being left behind. Transform our fear and feelings of isolation into hope and fraternity so that we may experience a true conversion of the heart. Help us to show creative solidarity in addressing the consequences of this global pandemic. Make us courageous to embrace the changes that are needed in search of the common good. Now more than ever, may we feel that we are all interconnected and interdependent. Enable us to listen and respond to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. May the present sufferings be the birth pangs of a more fraternal and sustainable world. Under the loving gaze of Mary, help of Christians, we make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. So we are very pleased to have a number of panelists with us today who are going to be sharing. We're going to have a keynote speaker. We're going to have a keynote speaker, and then we're going to have a number of case studies. And I apologize, I'm having a hard time advancing my slides. It seems like my screen has frozen. So I'm going to share that we're going to have a number of speakers that are going to share some case studies today. And then we are going to have time for questions and answers. We will have people who will be monitoring the chat, and they will then forward to me those questions at the end after we've heard all the presentations. Our first keynote speaker today will be Yeb Sanyo. and he is the executive director of Greenpeace in Southeast Asia. And I will let him introduce himself more further, as I apologize. My screen is frozen. I'm not able to read his full introduction, but we're very pleased to have him with us today. Yeb, I turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Marianne, and hello to everybody. Bear with me, I am using two different devices, one for my slides and one to, I hope you can hear my voice all right. Let me share that, and thank you very much. It's such an honor to join all of you today, and I'm really humbled to be part of this conversation as we celebrate the 5th anniversary of Laudato. I have been invited, of course, to join all of you today. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all sisters and brothers who are joining us in this webinar. I have been invited to provide a keynote message. That's always a tall order, of course, also noting the examples that you will hear later on from our friends on how things are happening on the ground. It's such a tall order to be given the task of delivering a keynote. You know, keynotes are supposed to set the tone, and so I hope I give justice to that expectation. I'd like to start with a reference to liturgical colors. And you know, when we celebrate our worship, our faith, and when we pray, it involves many of our senses, and I think all senses, including our visual senses. And prayer means being alive, being responsive to God's manifestations in all things around us, in our environment. And as such, when we engage in prayer, you know, the colors and the things that we see around us are that also represent our rituals. And as such, the liturgical color that we use right now, which is green, is really beyond rituals, beyond aesthetics. And like song and art, the liturgical visuals play a crucial role in inspiring us and in helping us make sense of the world. In the liturgical calendar, we know that green is the color for ordinary time. But my dear friends, contrary to our common notion of the word ordinary as used in ordinary time for the church calendar, there is really more to it than its commonness. At its etymological roots, the word ordinary as used in this sense is derived from the Latin orior, which actually translated into English is be stirred, to rise up, to grow. And that is the reason why green is the color of ordinary time, because it has a very rich meaning. It is related also to the word oriens, where the or east, where the sun rises. As such, green is symbolized in the liturgical color is far beyond its ordinariness. It means to rise up. It means to grow. It's an exhortation. It's not a time to be complacent. It is a time to be inspired, to be awakened, to rise up, and to grow in faith, in spirituality, but also in our duty as Christians as it evokes life and growth. So green has a lot more meaning than just being a color for our vestments. And the question before us is it time for the church to lead on sustainability? And is it time for the church to be a model for being green beyond the color of vestments? I think you know the answer to that. But as we continue this conversation, we are all reminded that the church has a very deep history of teaching on creation, on ecology, as well as how that relates to the poorest of our brethren. And care for our creation and care for the poor have been integral to Catholic teaching and to the Catholic narrative since the very, very beginning. And what we do see in more recent years, nonetheless, is the added sense of immense urgency that St. John Paul II, and Pope Benedict, and especially more recently Pope Francis, how they have included this sense of immense urgency in their call for all of us, even beyond Catholics, to act on the ecological crisis. And we are reminded by Pope Francis in Laudato Si that there is that challenge, the urgent challenge to protect our common home. And that challenge includes a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development. For we know that things can change. That is a very hopeful message. We know that things can change. And therefore, in reflecting on the question of, is it time to lead? For the church, the answer is unequivocal. It is not just time to lead. The church is uniquely positioned to lead. And we know that for a fact. And in asking that question, is it time for us to lead? We must reflect on the state of our common home as the Holy Father has reminded us to be aware of what's happening to our common home, which is he describes as falling into serious disrepair. And as we confront the environmental challenges that we have in front of us, we know the role of the church also in addressing poverty in a very profound way, because poverty persists. It continues to affect profoundly so many people in this world. What we also see before us is our continued addiction, reliance on a dirty, outmoded fossil fuel apparatus to fuel our economies. And we do know in our hearts that, abandoning this outmoded apparatus of the fossil fuel industry is not akin to stepping the brakes on economic development. We know that that we can continue to develop in a way that benefits people and planet without relying on dirty fossil fuels. The other realization we have, and I think this has become one of the things we would have been more acutely aware of, but now more profoundly aware of, is how we have been so dependent in our mobility also on the fossil fuel apparatus. And the coronavirus crisis I hope has given us some new realizations around how there is so much inequity in the way the system works. And as such, we must rethink, we must reimagine a different kind of future that allows us to move beyond the old normal. And that old normal had betrayed us tremendously. And therefore, we must do everything we can to take advantage of this blessing of the possibility of a better future, a better world. We're also seeing so much devastation around us. It's not just forests. Every living system in the world is in decline. Our forests are disappearing. There's so much plastic pollution in our oceans. Marine habitats are also being degraded. And I know that many people are kind of reflecting on the slowdown on infinite growth because of the COVID-19 crisis. But I would not go as far as saying that any of that is a blessing in disguise. It's not a blessing. It's also not in disguise. We know that as we speak, even as we are all hunkered down in our homes, under lockdowns, the mining industry, the logging industry, the coal-fired power plants are still running, and the forests are still being converted into plantations. So the devastation continues, and the ecological crisis and the climate emergency persists in our lives. And as we come together today to have this conversation, I invite all of you also take a moment to think about our sisters and brothers in Eastern India and in Bangladesh, and also our sisters and brothers here in the Philippines who had just suffered a very intense cyclone, even in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. And the climate emergency has not gone away. We continue to confront it, and we all know by now that the climate change is one of the biggest injustices in our history, and that the role of the church in fighting injustice has always been clear. And therefore, in reflecting on what we need to do as a community, as a church, and beyond the Catholic Church, across faith communities, fighting injustice is very much part of our tradition, but not just tradition. It is very much part of our teaching and of our spirituality. In Laudato Si, we are asked again, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to the children who are now growing up? This is a very sobering question. I always get teary-eyed reflecting on this question. I have children. I have a 16-year-old son. My daughter is 13-year-old. And when people ask us, why do we do what we do, standing up for what is right, to continue to reach out to people and defend the environment and heed the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, it's simply because the future generations, we owe it to future generations, and we owe it to our children to do the best we can to leave them a world that continues to be able to, that's able to nurture life in all its diversity. I'd like to summarize all of these problems in 3 words, all beginning with the letter A. I think whether it's in English, in Spanish, Italian, or French, and these 3 letters, these 3 words, I hope we are all familiar with because of our faith teachings. And these 3 words are avarice, arrogance, and apathy. Avarice is extreme greed, taking more than what you need, and without being mindful of what others need. Arrogance is thinking that you're better than God or better than nature. And apathy is the dangerous belief that it's somebody else's job to fix the problem. All of these things we need to fight against. And as a church, this is where we can truly make a big difference to fight avarice, arrogance, and apathy. These things sit at the root of the ecological crisis. And as we think about concrete ways, and we will talk about concrete ways that we are responding to the crisis, we always have to keep these root causes inside, front and center. In the encyclical, we are also told that many things have to change course, but we are also reminded that the problem lies with us, and there is a problem in the atmosphere. Now there's a problem with viruses. There is a problem in the air that we breathe, in the water we drink. But truly, the biggest problem lies in our hearts. And unless we look into our hearts and find a way to care for each other and prevent us from going beyond the most dangerous tipping point of all, and that threshold, that most dangerous tipping point is losing our ability to care for each other. And indeed, it is us, human beings above all, who need to change course. And while we do that, let us never forget that the root of this crisis is a system that commercializes, commodifies nature and life, and that therefore exacerbates all of these challenges of exploitation and unbridled consumerism. That comes from the Laudato Si as well, and this is a reminder to us that the challenges that we see on its face, there's more to it than just being an environmental problem. At the root of this is a spiritual issue, and therefore can only be resolved and addressed through a what Pope has correctly and dramatically described as an ecological conversion. And therefore, when we look at the issue beyond being an environmental issue, no discussion of the ecological crisis can be made in isolation from the issue of social justice. We are reminded of this to look at the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor together and never dissociate those two. And as we journey into what we hope to be a brighter future for all of us, we reflect on the role of the youth. And we've seen that amazing vibrance and emergence of the youth in recent times. And I hope it continues with or without a pandemic, because the task before us, before the young people, is to continue to open the roads and generate cracks in that system, in a system that has been destructive, has been damaging to our societies, and has been detrimental to the health of the planet. I also, of course, refer to the message from Laudato Si around integral ecology. This is central to the message from Pope Francis. And over again in the encyclical, we are reminded of the interrelatedness of things, that everything is connected to everything else. And this is how the church will continue to contribute towards addressing this big crisis before us. We know that there is a big challenge, and in the context of what the church can contribute to this big conversation, it is promoting that integral ecology. And I think it is important that we never ever forget that as we build this new future and embrace this opportunity, greed should never have a place in this kind of world. We envision to be just, equitable, green, and safe. I now go to this question as I wrap up. Do Catholics care about caring for our common home? And are we listening to what the encyclical has been saying? It's been 5 years since Pope Francis gave us this special message. And I believe Catholics do care, and that is evidence in the tremendous efforts around the world, speaking the truth about the reality of this crisis, bringing to light many aspects of the ecological crisis, and working very hard to create solutions, as you will hear more from our friends later. And many of you and many communities and organizations present here today, I'm so elated and to see how we are close to 1,000 people in this webinar. Wonderful, amazing, this is beautiful. And many of you who are here today are at the heart of these efforts to demonstrate that the church can truly make a difference. And many of you are involved in bearing witness, in educating people, in developing tools and solutions, and in telling the stories that need to be told. And in last year, this was last year, when middle of last year, when the Pope actually gathered executives from the oil industry and told them that we do need to embark on a radical energy transition. This is a very strong message coming from no less than Pope Francis. And this is getting translated at the local level. We see a lot of churches, as you will hear more later, a lot of churches going renewables, taking the path of renewables and divesting from fossil fuels. It's unprecedented. All of these things are happening, and it's giving us a lot of hope. But on the other hand, the writing is on the wall. Pope Francis has time and again reminded us time is running out, and we need to take decisive action. And when we hear the Holy Father talk about this, all of us at every level, in dioceses, in parishes, and as individuals and as families, we need to heed this call and take that decisive action, and that is something we must take to heart. But one of my most favorite examples of answering the question, do Catholics care about defending the planet? The Adorers of the Blood of Christ, Sisters of the Adorers of Blood of Christ in Pennsylvania in early July put a chapel right there where the Atlantic Sunrise gas pipeline would come through in order to block the pipeline. This is just really literally putting your faith on the line, and for me, this is a beautiful example of how Catholics are standing up and reminded of what green stands for, meaning to be stirred, to stand up, to rise up, and to grow. And finally, my most favorite line in the encyclical, the reason why we continue to have hope, the reason why we're all gathered here today, the reason why we celebrate solutions and the work being done by many of our friends and many communities involved in defending community rights and standing up for sustainability and for a more just and green future, is because we all believe that injustice is not invincible. This is just my absolute favorite line in the encyclical, in Laudato Si, and I hope you also embrace this as your own when we seek guidance from the message of Pope Francis. And finally, I know we're all on the screen, and this is this kind of interaction, something we're all getting used to, but I invite all of you to just hold in your heart the notion that no one is here by accident. I think there's close to 1,000 of us, more than 1,000 of us right now in this webinar. None of us, 1,197 people in this webinar, are here by accident. No one is here because someone pressured you to be here, but all of us are here because we're all part of the same historic and spiritual journey, all part of that same mission, a mission to make that another world possible. With that, I thank all of you. God bless all of you, and I hold all of you in my heart, and I hope you hold each other in your hearts as we all confront and go through these very trying times in our history. Thank you very much, and God bless all of you.
Thank you so much, Yeb. We really appreciate you being with us today. We know your country is suffering from yet another powerful typhoon, so we appreciate you being with us. And we also appreciate you for your witness. Many of us remember when you were the Philippines chief negotiator at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and your emotional appeal at that Warsaw summit to climate action, and the 14 days of fasting you had in solidarity with the people who at the time were suffering from Typhoon Haiyan, and also fasting for all the people confronting climate impacts around the world. So we thank you so much for that witness. You asked the question, what do Catholics care about our common home? And we're going to be hearing now from a few speakers who are going to answer with a resounding yes, some real case studies of Catholic institutions that are taking Laudato Si seriously and changing their practices, their lifestyles, policies to align with Laudato Si and address this ecological crisis that we're in. And we also are very aware, as you pointed out to us, Yeb, that we're in the midst of a global pandemic. And so when we hear about these sustainable practices, both big and small, to remember that these were done when we have people are able to make investments of time, money, energy, and people power of actually being together. And so we look to be inspired by these examples and know that there'll come a time, hopefully soon, when we can all be engaged in this kind of work again and work towards the more just and environmentally sustainable world we want to see at the end of this pandemic. So we are going to first hear from Dan Misla. He's the Executive Director of the Catholic Climate Covenant here in the United States. And he's going to share with us some of the exciting projects that they've been involved in. So Dan, I invite you to share with us now, please.
Great, thank you, Marianne. just to confirm that my screen is being seen. Yes, okay. Well, thank you again, and thank you to the organizers of Laudato Si Week. Thanks especially to the translator, and right next to my video camera, I have one word, slow, so I will try to speak slowly so those who are out there all over the world can understand a little bit more about what the Catholic Energies program is. It is a program of Catholic Climate Covenant, and Catholic Climate Covenant was founded in the United States in 2006 with the support of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and a number of other Catholic groups. Many of them are listed here. We now have 19 national Catholic partners that help us shape our agenda, and we also help them to integrate Laudato Si and Care for Creation teaching into the work that they do. The Catholic Church in the United States is fairly large. We are about a quarter of the population, it's about 70 million Catholics. We think there are some 80,000 buildings in the Catholic Church. And we decided around the same time that Laudato Si came out to create a program that we call Catholic Energies. The idea behind the program, and this is probably somewhat peculiar to the United States, but the idea behind it was to try to answer a question that I would get pretty frequently from parishioners, particularly, which is, why doesn't my pastor talk about these issues? Or why doesn't my bishop talk about these issues? And the fact that Genesis and our two previous popes and our current pope have talked about the need to care for creation and climate change in particular didn't seem to win the day. So I thought if we could show pastors and principals and bishops and other administrators of Catholic facilities how much money they could save by doing energy efficiency and solar projects, then we would have their attention. And then the second step would be, once they've realized those savings, to say, this is not just about saving money. This is not just about lowering greenhouse gases, as important as those two things are. This is also about being truly Catholic and living our faith to its fullest. So the Catholic Energies program was started. We focus on both energy efficiency and solar projects. And we know that our customers, who are Catholic schools, parishes, administrative buildings, retreat centers, hospitals, universities, any building that is owned and operated by the Catholic community, we know that they have buildings, but that's not the core of their mission. We know that they take a lot of resources to run. They have to be heated, they have to be cooled. There's a lot of appliances that are plugged into the outlets throughout the building. And there's a way to save that cost through energy efficiency and renewable energy. And we know that for every dollar that they reduce their energy expenses, they can put that back into their core mission. So the challenge that they have to do these things is that I don't know very many pastors or principals or other administrators who are experts in these areas, who can do energy projects. They require a substantial amount of time to research and all of the work that goes into that. They cost money. We can't just simply do an LED retrofit for our buildings without paying for those fixtures and those lights. So we can't do a solar installation without finding a source of money. So that's a challenge. And the third challenge is that there's a lot of organizations, a lot of companies out there that don't necessarily have the church's best interest in mind. So what Catholic Energies has done is we've tried to form an organization and a program that meets these three challenges. So our mission, Catholic Energy's mission, is to assist Catholic organizations to drive down energy costs so those resources can be redirected to the core mission. We provide everything. It's a turnkey solution. We identify opportunities, we finance those, and we install those projects, or we have companies that install those that we have vetted. And then the third and probably most important thing is what I mentioned earlier, is that this also provides, once these projects get underway and are completed, this provides an opportunity for the pastor, the principal, the leaders in that institution to educate their people about why they're doing this. It's a great witness to the wider community. So our first solar project was a parish in Virginia, in Hampton, Virginia. Father John Grace is the pastor there. And he was looking around to do a solar project, and somehow he discovered Catholic Energies. And he was very excited. He said, because this takes everything off my plate. I don't have to do the research. I don't have to find the vendor, the solar company to do the installation, and I don't have to raise money for this. So he came to us and we said, we're happy to work with you. So we designed a 142 kilowatt system for his roof, 440 panels, as you can see there. Was offsetting 100% of their electric consumption. So this produces enough electricity to power all 3 buildings that are part of that parish. It's a 25-year power purchase agreement, which means that there's a company that actually owns that and maintains that system. And the parish will pay that company for the electricity that is produced by those panels. And the overall savings between staying connected to the electrical grid, which they have to do because the sun doesn't shine at night, and the payments to the company that owns the solar system is a 14% savings. That money is now being diverted into a creation care team for the parish to do more work around that. In January, Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of Washington, here in Washington, D.C., turned on a 2 megawatt ground-based solar system that we designed and implemented for them. It's the largest solar project in Washington, D.C. They had an acreage that they could put a ground-based array on, and it's now saving the Catholic Charities for the Archdiocese of Washington $250,000 a year in energy savings. The company that owns this system has to pay a lease for the privilege of having those panels on the ground, which is $185,000 a year. That money is going to help to offset deferred maintenance on a building. In that building are Mother Teresa's nuns, the missionaries of charity, doing hospice work for low-income people throughout the region who are dying. And so it's just an amazing witness to the wider community, saving a lot of money. Catholic Charities with that money can hire more counselors, they can do more food programs, they can house more people who are homeless. So it's really a remarkable project. A third project was with the Order of Carmelites. We did 2 solar systems for them, one in Illinois and one here in Washington, D.C. We're offsetting 50% of their electric costs. This is a 20-year power purchase agreement, and they're saving 20% compared to what they were paying before on their electric bills. So we understand, our Catholic Energies team tries to understand the needs of every individual institution, whether it's a parish or a school. We work on their behalf. We're not selling anything except a service to the Catholic community. We are, we're sharing with them all of the economics. We even tell them if it's not going to work, if they live in an area, for example, where electric costs are really inexpensive and a solar project would not be able to lower their costs, we'll let them know. Some of them decide to go ahead anyway because they see the importance of being this witness to the wider community, but others they're waiting until the economics work a little bit better for them. We want to make sure that the projects are aligned with our Catholic values. So we carefully choose the companies that are going to do the installations. We make sure that the materials, the solar panels, are reputable, are quality materials. And then we understand that that this is all connected, as Pope Francis says, that this also assists the moral and spiritual imperative to care for creation and care for the poor. The way we do this is fairly simple. When someone comes to our Catholic Energies team to see if they could do some energy efficiency or solar work, we ask them to give us 12 months of their bills for every electric meter on their property. Our team examines those bills, time of use, the cost of the electricity, all of those things. They then create a preliminary design of the project and show what the cost and the savings are going to be. We ask them at that point to sign a non-binding letter of intent, meaning that they will continue to work with us through this process. We will then go out and look for the financing for that project. We have a number of financial institutions and individuals who are interested in our projects and want to get a good return on their investment. So we give them, in most cases, market returns on their investment. We then execute the contracts, and then we make sure we walk beside them to make sure that everything is going according to plan. So we make sure that the vendors are showing up on time, that, you know, if they run into some problems, we help them resolve those problems. And the end result is a wonderful project that they can be very proud of. The picture in the upper part of your screen, that's the gentleman who did the installation of the solar panels talking to the Missionaries of Charity. That's the Catholic Charities Project. So we are more than happy to share our model with you and to explain how we have done this. I will say that it took a lot of initial investment to get this up and running. The Catholic Climate Covenant receives a small finder's fee from the vendors, from the people who are actually doing the installation and the financing of these projects. That helps us expand the program and helps generate revenue for our core activities. So but in order to get to that point, we had to invest a lot of money into developing the project and developing the program. So please visit catholicenergies.org to see what we do and some of the other projects that we have done. And Catholic Climate Covenant is operating in the United States to try to help the Catholic Church understand and act on the issue of climate change. So thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back to Marianne.
Thank you so much, Dan. Very inspiring to hear what's being done here in the United States. We're now going to go to New Zealand, where we are going to hear via video the work being done in New Zealand in the Diocese of Wellington and in a parish there. And that is going to be brought to us via video because it's 1 a.m. there. So we want to respect that time difference. Just want to make sure everyone can see my screen at this moment. And we will hear from Catherine Gibbs and Estelle.
I'm Catherine, the environmental educator for the Wellington Diocese, and I'm working with Estelle, who will share her parish case study. We share the same vision, to raise awareness and to empower parishioners to link their faith with caring for creation so that we can sustain a better life for all. The Wellington Synod made several recommendations, and one of them focused on caring for creation. This struck a chord with me, as I'd been feeling very despondent about the way we were ignoring the warning signs our planet was sending us, that our throwaway culture was destroying the very things we need to survive. So the first thing I had to do was make sure I was walking the talk, trying to live sustainably, and then I talked to my parish priest about getting the parish involved. My idea was picked up enthusiastically, and we set about preparing a series for Lent in 2019. The trigger was the International Panel for Climate Change, signalling an alarming timeframe of 10 years to reduce our carbon in order to meet the obligations set by the Paris Agreement. Now, most Christians understand their responsibility as co-creators with God to ensure future generations can reach their potential. So keeping the focus on the long game, we needed to set a target. Potentially, my own diocese could take the lead setting a goal, and so we set 80% of parishes could possibly achieve formation in Laudato Si over 3 years. Taking small steps, knowing the Holy Spirit would accompany those steps, we set out in hope and trust. Having a shared vision was important. We encouraged interested people to read Laudato Si, especially Chapter 4 on integral ecology. Core principles were established with the group, such as those that are based on gospel values. All meetings were plastic and paper-free. We encouraged sharing of transport. We had home cooking. We used trade aid coffee and tea at supper. And our thank you gifts avoided the usual petrol voucher, and instead we used gifts of recycled plant pots and seedlings or book vouchers. It was important to recognise the danger of moving straight into action without conversion, without understanding the why, to sustain efforts long term. And we reminded ourselves that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Following a clear process was very important. We decided to hold 3 sessions, 1 week apart, and then the final session 6 months later, with transitioning from the big picture to the small local scene. Feedback was positive and people began to get involved in local initiatives, and they now have greater awareness of their carbon footprint. Some examples of leading to a more sustainable lifestyle included the group called Friends of Mana Island, which is an offshore reserve, which is now predator-free to save the native bird life. We're relocating endangered seabirds and replanting the native bush. The Nature School Trust held classes outside in their outdoor classroom. The Friends of the Taupo Swamp are encouraging regeneration of the wetland ecosystem that runs right next door to State Highway 1. And the Guardians of the Inlet are restoring the health of an important estuary and wetlands with riparian planting, regular shellfish counts, and are making submissions to the regional council and local bodies. Our Ecology, Justice and Peace Commission then invited me to apply for funding to run a similar program in 3 more parishes in 2020. 2 parishes took up the invitation during Lent, and hopefully there'll be 1 more in September. St Joseph's Upper Hutt chose water as their focus, with examples linked to sustainability. Some examples of their speakers. They had someone who talked about clothing for compost. She was testing the theory of if waste becomes currency. Another speaker spoke of the importance of wetlands to sustain local ecosystems. And this involves some delicate dialogue with local developers who are also parishioners. The issue of water quality of their river was important. They need to find ways of providing drinking water for 60,000 people anticipated in the region over the next 30 years. And Recycling and Waste Minimisation Centre is in their city plan, and they've been calling for submissions from this group. So Estelle now is going to continue with the response from her parish in Apairy.
Kia ora, I'm Estelle. Apairy Parish has a small JPD group who are very concerned about the environment and the poor. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to run this program with the guidance of Catherine as the facilitator. We chose Hear the Cry of the Earth, Whakarongo ki te tangi a Papatuanuku, for the title of the program. As a parish, we place an importance on our bicultural relationship, hence our title also in Te Reo Māori. We too decided on Lent, a time of conversion, a time to slow down and grow in our awareness and appreciation of our environment, to work together to hear the cry of the earth. Our vision was to deepen our understanding of the messages in Laudato Si and to undertake to live more sustainably through an ecological conversion. It would be a great outcome if it led people to more active discipleship of creation. We organised a range of speakers for each session, utilising local people. It was important to have the parish priest on board, parish council engagement and outreach to the Tongan and Filipino communities, a large part of our parish. As well as evening sessions, we would embed Laudato Si into the liturgy of the 5 weeks of Lent, and we called on our liturgy committee to help with the planning of this. We used a composition by Helen Fisher, one of our talented parishioners, He Waiata Mo Laudato Si, and we sang that at the masses in Lent and at the opening sessions for each evening. Promotion included advertising the evening sessions at our masses and testimonies from attendees, encouraging others to come along too. The weekly newsletter had a whole page dedicated to the theme and suggested practical actions, nudging people towards that great outcome that we desired. The first evening was designed to look at the big picture. Laudato Si states, ecology calls for greater attention to local cultures when studying environmental problems, favouring a dialogue between scientific technical language and the language of the people. Danny, Vicar for Māori in the Wellington Archdiocese, took us back to the Maori creation story and showed how the earth, mountain, rivers are our mother, brothers and sisters, and we are all interconnected. A clear understanding of what is at the heart of Maori spirituality and tikanga, cultural traditions and practices, can lead to ecological conversion. Catherine helped those who attended come to a deeper knowledge of what is happening to our earth and how our actions impact on this due to the choices we make. At session 2, Professor David Frame shared with us the challenge of addressing climate change on a global scale. Climate change is a good example of a hard problem to solve, even though we can see what the problem is. However, David said there are good examples where global collective action solved hard problems. The eradication of smallpox, the ozone hole, and now the global response to COVID-19. Stuart, my husband, spoke about the practical action he and I took of using a carbon footprint calculator for the month of February. He demonstrated how changing a variable, such as adding a domestic flight or an international flight, had a staggering effect on our CO2 emissions. The take-home messages were clear: travel less, take public transport, cycle or walk, use video conferencing instead of business travel. Little did anyone know at the time that we would be forced into some of these behaviours due to COVID-19 lockdowns and global closure of borders. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has been a big blow, as this third session has not been able to take place yet. In this interactive session, a Korori Kaitiaki member will explain how they remove noxious weeds and plant natives in the local area and clean streams. A council person will inform people about practical ways to reduce waste by recycling, but more importantly, how to reuse and repurpose household waste. Two parishioners will share their experiences with hybrid and electric vehicles. Predator control is practiced in our local area. The next speaker will explain how this is carried out in the recreational areas, as well as by having a rat trap in your own backyard. Catholic students are taking action, and two secondary school students will share ways their schools are becoming more sustainable. This last session will happen by Zoom or when we can have gatherings once more. Then, before the end of the year, we will have a follow-up session to give feedback, share what has been happening and changed for us as individuals, and decide strategies for where to next as a community. For example, a waste and energy audit for the parish. We are on the way.
So to round this off, we're reminded how interconnected we are. Ko ao te awa, ko te awa, ko ao. I am the river is me. This Māori proverb expresses a unique situation we have here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The personhood of a river has been embedded into law here, and the implications are huge. That we're responsible for the well-being of all parts of the ecosystem, both human and other than human. Everything is connected. And this returns us to Laudato Si, Chapter 4, on integral ecology. And how must we respond? Well, we can do this through 3 social justice actions for a sustainable future. Through advocacy, speaking out through local media and dialogue with others. Through empowerment, by helping people grow their own ability to deal with the issues in their own context. And consciousness raising, by getting involved in communal action and through education. This is a process we're committed to work on, and we're happy to have had the opportunity to share it with you. We'd just like to finish by acknowledging all the different people who have been involved in this effort over the last year and a half. And thank you for watching.
Thank you so much. That was so very impressive, and just shows how much we can integrate Laudato Si in the life of a diocese, in the life of a parish, and even weaving it into liturgy is just beautiful. And then talking about people at all levels, individuals, schools, the life of the community can be engaged. Thank you so much. We are now going to return to the United States and share an example of one of the many ways that congregations of women religious are involved in bringing Laudato Si to life. And we're very pleased to have Sister Gail Worcello from the Green Mountain Monastery in Vermont. So Sister Gail, we invite you to share your presentation and share your experiences with us.
Oh, greetings, everyone. And it's a joy to be connected to each of you inside this 5th anniversary celebration of Laudato Si. And I thought that what I'd like to do is introduce you to our community, Sisters of the Earth community at Green Mountain Monastery and the Thomas Berry Sanctuary, by giving you a bit of background first that grounds our practical ways of living sustainably. So with that background in mind, I'd like to just introduce to you Father Thomas Berry. In 1984, during my novitiate with the Passionists, the sisters of the community brought in guest speakers and scholars to give us classes. And Father Thomas Berry, who is the man on the right in the picture on the upper left of the screen, came in to give us classes. And during that time, he oriented us to the universe story and our role in that story as humans, as Christians, and as members of the Earth community. And also oriented us to the devastation that was taking place on the planet, and pointed out, like within the charism of the Passion is charism, that this is the place where Christ is suffering his present passion. And Jen asked the question, do Catholics care? And Thomas Berry was a Catholic priest who cared so deeply, and his voice was one of the early voices that was speaking out and alerting us to the devastation that was taking place on the planet, speaking about this over 40 years ago. And I began my studies with Thomas in my novitiate, as I said, in 1984, until his passing in 2009. In 1999, I was missioned by my Passionist community with Father Thomas and Sister Bernadette to found the first Catholic community of sisters whose specific mission is the healing and protection of Earth and its life systems. So our fundamental orientation inside of this mission is to go into the future with the natural world as a single sacred community. And this is an eco-poetic way of saying what all of the speakers have been saying. It's the language of the heart, a single sacred community. The focus of our mission is bringing about what Thomas Berry called the ecozoic era. And it's a phrase coined by Father Thomas, which translates as house of life. House of life. And it's similar to what Pope Francis calls our common home. So eco, the translation of eco is house, and zoa means life. And where does this word ecozoic come from? It comes from the geological history of our planet Earth. So early on, the early Earth was called the Paleozoic. That's early, paleo and zoa, life, early life. And then we had the Mesozoic. So Earth moved through the Mesozoic era, middle life of Earth. Ceno means recent. So the Cenozoic was the most recent life emergence and unfolding of the planet. And that took place over the last 65 million years. And we are at the end of the Cenozoic era. So Thomas Berry proposed what we're facing now and what Pope Francis is articulating so clearly in Laudato Si, that we're faced with either going into the future as a house of life, an ecozoic community, or going in another direction, which Thomas referred to as the technozoic. And Jeb was talking a lot about that. You know, Jeb, when you were mentioning coal and mining and the destruction of the forest, and well as climate change and all of that that's leading to our planetary collapse. So we're all together in this, facing a direction, and it's not simply our human direction. We are part of a whole biological and geological history of the planet itself. So the planet finds itself in a new era, and its future, you know, in most ways will be dependent upon our decisions as we proceed forward. So when Thomas Berry talks about ecozoic or house of life, he gave us about 12 principles, but I really wanted to focus on the first principle of the ecozoic era, which really forms the foundation for sustainable living. And that first principle is this, that Earth is a communion of subjects and not a collection of objects. And this principle is a core component of sustainability. And it's not sustainability from the outside, it's sustainability from the inside, because it's the interior, it's got to come from the heart. The communion of subjects can only be met from heart to heart, or through encounter, let's say. And in which we recognize the subjectivity of all beings on the planet, and how do we connect to the subjectivity of other, whether that's another human or a life form or a tree, an animal, a plant. It's through an encounter and the capacity for us to meet other in an encounter that is heart-centered. And we know from all that we've just heard and through Laudato Si that what we're facing here is complete violation at so many levels of this first principle, the disappearance of the subject. So if the principle is Earth is a communion of subjects and not a collection of objects, so many places that we look at in our world, we are noticing and experiencing firsthand the disappearance of the subject. And we see what happens when subjectivity gets disappeared. So to deepen an understanding, I just want to share with you, in case you want to read further, these are the books, some of the books of Thomas Berry that help us move into the ecozoic era, that help us embrace the Earth as a communion of subjects and not a collection of objects. So these are some reference materials for you if you would like to pursue the writings of Thomas Berry further. Now, in Laudato Si, Pope Francis writes that there is nobility in caring for the natural world through daily actions. So I'm just going to share with you that nobility of how are we caring for the natural world through our daily actions. And maybe, you know, you can relate to what I'm saying because maybe you're doing the same thing, or this will be inspiring to you and maybe get you to think of more practical ways you yourself can enter into the communion of subjects. So the first thing that I'd like to mention is our solar panels, and we just had a beautiful presentation on the solar panels. Our entire monastery is facing south, so our total building is a receptacle for the sun. And about 15 years ago, we engaged in a program that our state had which was a rebate program. And we received a huge discount on these solar panels. And so since that time, for 15 years, the sun has generously provided us with electricity. And another practical way of being sustainable here is that we installed a wood-burning stove that is called a Russian fireplace. And this fireplace is completely sustainable because the inside tubes in which the smoke circulates gets clean. So when the smoke spews out the top, there is no pollution happening. And all of the stones in our fireplace come from local area. And then we embedded in those stones that you see, the fireplace on the right, the Russian fireplace, we embedded the history of the geological history of Vermont. So this stove is not just sustainable, but it's beautiful. And it's also a teaching tool to help us learn the geological history of our particular bioregion. And another way that we live sustainably here is through, we have a commitment to sustainable building design. And years ago, we decided to use a renewable resource from our own land. So straw in this part of the world is renewable. So the farmers cut straw every year. And so we decided with the help of a building company, a sustainable building design company, to build a straw bale hermitage for our guests who want to come here on retreat. So the building school had a class on timber frame design, which you could see on the left. And the students constructed the frame, and that building school then donated the frame to us. And then we worked with the building school to create the straw bale house. And the straw bale house is very sturdy. It will never fall. And the straw is covered over with stucco that you can see in the bottom picture. And we've had the building now for about 12 years. And it is completely cool in the summer, and it stays very warm in the winter because straw bales are very thick and they're insulators. We also are modeling just different building designs here. So this is a yurt, and this is our current chapel. It's a circular, low impact tent-like structure, and it's movable. So this is another one of our beautiful design features. Another way that we are engaging sustainably is through a forest management program. So we have involved our forest in a 20-year management program plan with our state. And we follow a protocol for taking care of our forests, which is about 158 acres over the course of 20 years. And each year we're working on different aspects of the forest to maintain it. And I just want to say that where we live, we're in the forest. We like to call ourselves forest dwellers, and everything about our place is wood. So if you come to our monastery, our floors are wood, our tables are wood, our bowls are wood, our doors are wood. So we are celebrating the gift of our particular bioregion in the very materiality of what makes our monastery. And our place is very crafted. It's crafted because we work with the wood. We work together with the wood, or with people who work with wood. And the table that you see on the upper left was made by a man who took trees that had fallen and were not going to be used. They were not good for the lumberyard. Nobody could make anything out of that. And he took these trees that just would have been on the forest floor, and he so honored those trees and made this beautiful butternut table for us. Another way that we live sustainably is we promote organic farming and gardening. And because for us, organic matters, and I'm sure it matters for you too. So we don't want to be putting toxic chemicals into our soils and be growing food with chemicals. We would never serve guests that come to us for retreat or visits any kind of food that has, chemicals that would hurt them or the land. So sustainable growing. And also, I just wanted to show you this. This is a plant that we are going to grow this year, and it has so many meanings. This plant is called kernza, and kernza is a perennial wheat that builds the soil and takes carbon out of the atmosphere. But look at those roots. I mean, aren't those roots incredible? But this is an incredible plant that is actually helping the earth, and it's a wheat that it's a perennial, so it's a wheat that continues growing. And it reminds us that we need to honor our roots, that wherever we are, we need to come home to place, to know the place, to come back into the rootedness in place, to know the life community that is there wherever we live. And here are just some photos of our organic gardens. And our gardens are built on a design called permaculture design. And permaculture design is a systems approach to growing food and to living within the total system of the life community. This is our greenhouse, and this is our work in the garden. And I want to show you this because Pope Francis talks about the dignity of labor. And we highlight here the dignity of manual work, along with Pope Francis, like the beauty of hand to soil. And this has to do with sustainability as well, because when we're working with the earth, we ourselves become sustainable. We are strong and healthy, and we are engaging our bodies physically with the natural world, as well as eating from the fruits of our labor. So it's a beautiful, our labor is a beautiful, and your labor too, wherever you're working with the earth community, it's a beautiful labor of love to work with our planet. Now, this is another important aspect of sustainability that you can do yourself. This is called vermicomposting, and these are worm bins. And we celebrate these worms as the great transformers. So when you're working with soil and you shred some newspapers up to put into the vermicomposting bin, the worms eat the garbage, the worms eat the newspapers, and they transform all that bad news into life-giving soil that changes our world. And this is just a photo of us serving guests from our gardens. We belong to a co-op as well. This is another sustainable act because the food comes locally, and through our co-op, of which we are member owners, we try to support the local food economy within a 100-mile radius. We don't have chemicals in our monastery, so we try to use natural cleaning products, shampoos and deodorants, for example. We support a vegetarian and vegan diet because we love the animals who are precious to us in the sacred community of life. No fast foods. We have a conservation easement in which we're putting our land into a land trust, so our acreage will be preserved in perpetuity. We also have a butterfly nursery, and you see the butterfly on the right. We named him Robert, and he had broken wings. At times we have done surgery on butterflies, and we have fixed their wings, but Robert we could not fix. So he stayed with us, and we cared for him for 6 weeks until he met his end. And butterflies usually last for 6 weeks. And so we do sustainable harvesting of balsam, hand harvesting, and we make Christmas wreaths, which help support our community. And lastly, I want to just mention someone mentioned yesterday the chaplet. So there was an idea of prayer beads yesterday, and I just wanted to share our prayer beads. So we make and create these earth prayer beads, and they've gone all over the world, and they're modeled on the ancient beggar beads, where people put these beads around their wrists and said the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. And so we created these earth beads to have something to pray with and keep us mindful. And lastly, I just want to end with a quote from Pope Francis. Pope Francis in Laudato Si said, "Mary, the mother who cared for Jesus, now cares with motherly affection and pain for this wounded world." And our sister Bernadette created this icon of Mary of the Cosmos, and in joining with Pope Francis to go with Mary and call on Mary as the protectress of our beautiful earth, and ask her to guide us into the future on this path of sustainability. So, so thank you, everyone, and I just join my heart with yours as we go into the future as a single sacred community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sister Gail. All the practices you're doing there are all individual things we can all consider for ourselves, our parishes, our schools, all the institutions that we're part of. A wonderful example of what women religious are doing in their congregations. You kind of wrap up in one community the individual things that sisters are trying to do to live out Laudato Si. So thank you for that. We do have a few moments for questions. And I'd also ask if there might be a possibility for questions we can't get to, if we might be able to find a way to email, facilitate some email sharing with the facilitators for people who have questions that we can't get to in the next few moments. But Laura, could you maybe share out loud the questions that you'd like to pose to the our presenters?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Laura, and I'm with the Global Catholic Climate Movement. And I've been looking at all your interesting comments, questions, and chats in the chat box as we've been going along. And I think actually there have been some quite specific questions, which I think we can definitely follow up with our panelists on. There was a lot of interest in whether Dan's initiative, which he talked to us about, it really inspired a lot of people, and if that exists in other parts of the world. So I think that's a really good takeaway for us, because we're looking at building a resource library, to think about how when something has worked so well in one location, how we can do that bit of research to help shine a light on where similar projects are happening elsewhere as well. So there was a lot of interesting questions on that in the chat. Also, just what I thought was absolutely lovely is the amount of sharing, and that's what we really wanted for this session. We wanted to show that sustainability can be for everyone, for people at the start of their journey, for people wanting to start their vegetable garden, or for people wanting to invest in solar panels. And the range of comments really demonstrates how people are at different points, but there was lots of sharing, and particularly it was great to hear from New Zealand. And there was a comment that someone in Lima in Peru was going to try and replicate in New Zealand, which I thought was wonderful. Yeah, so I think the word inspiration came up a lot as well. So in the questions also, I suppose there are more comments. We also heard people talk authentically about some of the challenges. So there were questions around, well, if I want to do that, how much does it cost? And we know that there are real challenges around sustainability. So there was that. There were questions around, my building is a historic building. It may be listed, there may be limitations. How do I overcome some of those challenges? So I think just a great amount of inspiration, shared ideas and shared challenges as well. So I'm just going to have a look and see if there's anything specific in there. There were questions about the presentations. We will endeavour to share the presentations that we can on the website. So that's something that we want to do following the webinar. And anything specific, because lots of questions came through in different languages, we will also look out for any themes or anything specific and think about how we can update this group of people on some of the themes that are coming through. I'll hand back to you, Marianne, because I think we just have a few minutes left, and I know you have some calls to action.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laura. That was very helpful to have people monitoring the chat and be able to summarize for us all the rich conversation there. Much appreciated. So we want you to think, taking all the richness that we've just shared, want us to think about our next step in the journey. The season of creation is September 1st to October 4th. And given that we were not able to gather in our parishes, in our religious communities, in our schools in person during Laudato Si week, we're being invited to move those actions to the season of creation when hopefully we can be engaging in person. So please start thinking about what you and your communities might be able to do to maybe replicate one small example of what you learned today and start building this path towards total sustainability that the Vatican just recently is inviting the whole Catholic Church to participate in. And then more immediately, we have this Sunday, the World Day of Prayer. And we invite everyone, wherever you may be at noon at your time, to pray with the prayer that we opened our time this morning, this afternoon with. You can find that on the laudatosi.org website under prayer, and the prayer card is there. And we just know we're going to be feeling the power of that prayer at that time for our world in the midst of pandemic, for our world also in the midst of ecological crisis, and a world that wants to move beyond the pandemic and more environmentally sustainable, and knowing we can all be part of that journey together. So I want to thank Yab Sanyo for his inspiring words to start us off. Thanks to Dan Misla, to Catherine and Estelle in New Zealand, to Sister Gail, and special thanks to Laura of the Global Catholic Climate Movement for pulling this together, and their tech team for helping me and the panelists out with the technological challenges. And a special thank you and word of gratitude to the interpreters. This is a very big job to be doing this via technology. So we greatly appreciate their work to make us able to share this time together across many languages, across many time zones, across many countries. So thank you, everyone, and wish you all a good rest of the day, a good evening, a good night, and enjoy the rest of Laudato Si week.